Yo, what's up, everyone? We are back with another episode of Unfucking Your CX, and I am very excited for our guest today. But before we get into that, this is going to be episode number 6. So the first 5 episodes have been absolute fire, 5 topics, 3 player tips each. So you have 15 player tips that are very actionable. And I know Tim's going to bring some more fire today. So, Tim, welcome to the hot seat.
Thank you, Zack.
Tim and I met like some of my other guests, just engaging conversations through LinkedIn. So Tim hit me up in some comments. We've been having some really engaging discussion back and forth. Sometimes we debate a little bit, which I think is really, really healthy for us as CX practitioners. So Tim, got a question. Let's say I'm there local with you. We're just 2 friends, 2 colleagues having a conversation about CX. Set the scene for us. Are we in your favorite pub? Are we in your favorite cafe? Are we having a beer or are we having a coffee or maybe even something else?
Yeah, so it will definitely be a beer if it was up to me. And I'm living near a river near Deventer in the Netherlands, and this has this really awesome container cafe where it's only like a pop-up when it's summer, when it's nice weather. It's setting up the chairs outside, and it has a tent and it has a bar. So that's perfect for like having a beer there and sitting next to the river and watching the sun go down, and having a talk about what you've experienced or what you've
Yeah. That's
have done the day.
that sounds amazing because real quick, if I remember right, Netherlands is a big shipping import export, right?
Yes,
Where
definitely.
they
Yeah.
build, yeah. So I'm assuming when I heard the containers, right, and it's been repurposed into this pub, like that's super incredible. So hopefully one day in person I'll get there. Tim, you've got a ton of experience in customer experience. You're not just one of these thought leaders that just continuously talks about the same things, but you're actually in the trenches. You're a practitioner like many of us, and you've got a lot of experience. So, what is one topic that continuously comes up, whether you're running it in the company, working with different folks, maybe it's coming up in inner circles, or you see it on LinkedIn? What is one topic that just still continues to bother you that you want to unfuck today?
All right. So it's hard to choose one topic, but we'll come back to that later maybe. But I think the biggest frustration within CX and UX is that there are set up certain frameworks and that everybody's eager to work with them and just to if you're really into like CX and optimizing, you really want to make sure that you are able to follow those structures and make it work and like want to preach that into the entire company. But of course, other teams have their own framework, their own communication, their own terminology. So you have to really understand that you cannot keep it within your own silo with your own CX bubble. You have to work outside and you have to understand the bubble outside or your circles outside of your own team.
Yeah, I think that's so important, right? Because every discipline within the organizations, so customer experience, e-commerce, customer success, if you're in B2B, UX, marketing, operations, ultimately, we all have our own playbooks that make that specific
Yes,
discipline successful, right? And we're
yes,
all
yeah.
listening to the same kind of inner circles, right, of customer experience. We're typically just listening to that. And I love your point where the playbooks have really good intention, the frameworks have incredible intention, but ultimately in a very siloed effect, not looking across the organization. And so, Tim, when you've seen this, what are some of the downfalls of everyone just working on their own specific framework, but not sharing their frameworks holistically or even aligning what those frameworks should look like?
Yeah, yeah. So the first downfall of having your own framework and then focusing on your customer experience is that that's also how people tend to focus on customer satisfaction, but don't tend to act on like what is the effect of changing that. You do your research and deliver it to like your manager, and he says thank you and does nothing, right? Because you don't understand how to make it a deliverable for the next team, the team that needs to pick it up for you.
Yeah, look, I've experienced that as well. I mean, ultimately just my time and leading customer experience strategies. Of course, there's not a school for customer experience. Even here in the States, and I know globally, there's not like a bachelor's degree in customer experience. And I know that there's a master's program at Michigan State here in the US. And then of course we have some of the other organizations that offer a certificate. But even then, what they don't offer, Tim, is how to work cross-functionally. So that brings us to your three-player tips. You've been able to build cross-functional teams, drive alignment within organizations because you've built and really created some of the best CX strategies and execution of those strategies within organizations. So let's get to your player tips. What's the first action or the first player tip that any practitioner can take?
I think the first player tip that you have to do as a practitioner is to make sure that the improvements that you tend to make or the improvement and the roadmap of the company is linked to the actions that you take. So if you want to improve customer satisfaction, why do you want to do that? What is the effect on the customer or the company's revenue, or what is the effect if the churn is lower? So you really have to learn to quantify your improvements of a better experience. So the only way to do that is to understand the metrics and the targets that your other teams in the company have. So you can say, we are going to improve this, and this is going to help you get more returns, or it's going to help you reduce calls. Or so this is how you can quantify and translate impact of customer experience improvements to impact for other teams.
I love that player tip. I think there's actually kind of two player tips in the one, which is even better. But the first one, Tim, that you mentioned is really ensure that you are aligned to the company's strategic initiatives. And
Yes.
that's so important because I think what a lot of people fail to understand sometimes, or at least I did when I first started leading experience strategy, is those 3 to 5 strategic initiatives. That's where all the funding and resource allocation, that's where everything is going because
Yeah.
those are the big bets that she has sold to our investors or she sold to the streets, right? You're a publicly traded company, that these are the big bets to help us achieve long-term success. And too often, I think as CX practitioners, or at least what I did wrong at the very beginning, was I maybe didn't align to those. And so now what I'm trying to do is I'm trying to compete for funding and resources that's not aligned to where our executive team is at. So I'd love, like, is there like one kind of crisp example of a time where you had success getting funding and resource allocation to maybe redesign a customer friction because it aligned to the strategic initiatives?
Yes. I have a few examples. So I have to really think carefully on what's the best one. But for instance, there was a company let me pick one.
Folks, for those of you, I this is the hot seat. So while Tim's thinking about it, we don't rehearse because we want this just to be a normal conversation, like we're
Yeah,
having a a beer at this container pub.
yeah,
So
yeah.
you're seeing it, right? I'm putting Tim in the hot
Yeah,
seat.
yeah. I think I have a good example. For instance, when I worked for one of my clients, it's sold clothing online. They were having a great conversion rate, but they were really struggling with like the revenue, and they didn't really understand what was happening. And I was responsible for, as a CXO specialist at that time, to help that client understand why the conversion rate was good, but why is it not that people are coming back? The only way that you really can understand and can sync up with your managers is asking them, what do you want to achieve this year? What is your struggles? And what is your what? They can tell you have to do this for your CX, but if you don't ask why and you don't ask why they want to have achieved that, you might come up with a different solution than they tell you. But you still have to keep in mind, you are the expert in CX, but they are the expert in what they need to achieve for the company.
I love that. That is an incredible example of cross-functional alignment, right? Where you're essentially not pushing CX on your cross-functional partner. You're essentially asking them, what is the most important thing they need to achieve this year? And then how do you influence what they need to achieve with the frictions that you're seeing? That's
Yeah.
incredible. What's player tip number 2?
All right. Player tip number 2 is make sure that if you find something, it comes back into the organization and that you are making sure that it's becoming something that is consistent, right? And it doesn't matter how you solve that. Is it going to be a newsletter? Is it going to be like a monthly message in Slack or whatever? Or is it going to be a monthly recurring meeting? But it has to be recurrent. So you're gonna get like a steady, like reserved time for CX and insights and learnings that you have. So even when you don't have learnings, and that's something that we struggle with when you do research, right? It might take some time, or like A/B testing as well. It might take some time, or you might not have all significant winners and stuff like that. Then you have to really still keep that time and just include them and include the listeners or the people in the room to get feedback and get initiatives. So make it like an ideation session and just brainstorm on what you can do next if you struggle with something or if you have like the new insights.
Yeah, I love that. I love just continue. What we say here in the States is continuously just beating the
Yeah,
drum, right? Having
yeah,
that small, steady drum beat. Because I think what a lot of practitioners underestimate is we are influencers, or dare should I even say, sellers of change within our organization. And so ultimately, driving change management is probably one of the hardest things that I've ever had to do and
yeah,
continuously do because it's human behavior, right? And we all
yeah,
like comfortability. So, what I love about your player tip is constantly kind of creating that drum beat for everyone around here's what we're learning, here's what we're having success with, or hey, look, here's a learning that it didn't go so well, but we need to go back and do more A/B testing. We need to do more research. We need to work a little bit more collaboratively to solve this specific challenge. So bringing everyone along the way for change versus just trying to push change onto everyone. And you're doing that with steady and frequent communication. Love that one.
yeah,
Tim,
yeah.
what's the third actionable player tip?
So the first actionable player tip that really helped me came from Ruben de Boer from Online Dialogue, and he held a presentation about promoters and detractors, but not in NPS way, but in the way that people inside organizations are against you or with you, and you really have to focus on the people that are motivated and that are with you in like improving customer centricity. First thing when I come into an organization is just like map out and understand, all right, who is really focusing on customer centricity, even if they're not in the team, and if they're like in the email team or whatever, who is there that really likes this topic, and you have to include them and you have to involve them, and then you can input and get ideas from them. But if people are against you, then you have to start like a little bit of propaganda and just educate yourself on why and educate them on why they should.
I think that's an incredible third player tip, and one that I think one ties to player tip number 2, but it's the most overlooked in any organization is find your CX champions, like you said. Who is for
Yes.
this? Who's
Yeah.
passionate about customer experience? Who's that promoter of which within your organization who can help you, right? Create that solid kind of drumbeat. But ultimately, they're going to fight for customer experience when you can't be in the room. They're going to champion it. I think that is an incredible player tip to end on. Tim, I this has been a fantastic conversation.
Thank you.
I know a lot of our listeners probably want to learn more about your experience. Where can they find you?
Well, first of all, come join me and follow me on LinkedIn. It would be awesome to have you in my in my network. So please take a look there.
Yeah, Tim puts out a lot of
Yeah,
great content, folks. And what I love about Tim is he also engages. He doesn't just put out content, but if you engage with his content and you leave a comment or ask a question, Tim always engages back. Now, Tim, I would be remiss if we didn't tell our listeners what you're up to. You are about to drop a book.
yeah, yeah.
And I know you're super excited. I am so excited for you as well. Tell our listeners about it and where they can get a copy of it.
All right. So the book is called Maturing in Customer Experience Optimization. This book has come into play when I experienced, like, from different clients, but also like over the last 20 years, what are the struggles that not only the CX team or the CRO team or the UX team that I was in for larger and smaller companies were struggling with, but it was always they have the framework, it didn't really fit in the team, and how do you start to optimize from there? So there are so many different maturity levels and different ways of teams working there. You cannot have one framework that fits everybody. So you really have to, like, lay it all on the ground, see, all right, people are starting here, but they might also start in a different maturity level. And that's why I'm talking about maturity. And from there, you have to really understand, all right, at this point, I'm in this level, and that's what I have to do. And that's something I've written down in this book based on the 5 maturity levels and based on like 11 categories within these levels, to write down these are the next steps, the actionable steps that you can take to optimize from your maturity level.
Yeah, folks, I've had an early pre-read on it. This isn't like your typical 5 phases of consulting maturity that we've all
Now,
seen. This is tried and true practitioner level maturity, just like through Tim said, the last 20 years of this. So we'll put a link in it below in the podcast. Tim, thank you so much for joining us in the hot seat, and we hope you'll come
yeah,
back
and
soon.
thank you, Zach, for having me.
Yeah, cheers, bud.